What's up, guys, and welcome back to Overkill Gaming, your home for high-end gaming, whether it's PC, PS5, or handheld. We got you covered. Now, unless you're new to the channel, you guys know just how much I love the Steam Deck. I take this thing with me just about everywhere, to work, on long trips, to the doctor's office, you name it. It has been my go-to gaming device since the day it arrived. And fun fact, I also own two pretty beefy PC gaming rigs. One has an AMD CPU, 2080 Super GPU, and the other one has an Intel CPU and an RTX 3090. And I also own a PlayStation 5. And by far, out of all of them, the one I have been using the most is the Steam Deck. Not just when I'm out of the house, but even when I am home, I find myself playing on the Steam Deck more often than any other device. And I think the reason is because it offers something that the others don't. It offers the ability to play what I want, when I want, and where I want. The ability to play even AAA games without having to be in any specific location or having to carve out time in my busy schedule. I can be at work on my break and get in a quick 15 to 30-minute gaming session. I can come out of my game room and head to the living room with my wife and play a game while enjoying a movie in the background. The Steam Deck for me was really an introduction to the world of PC gaming handhelds, which I am starting to believe may actually be the future. It was the beginning of a new and exciting journey, and now for the next stage of that journey. Today we will be unboxing the Ayaneo Geek. Wait. The Ayaneo what? All right. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Ayaneo Geek, it is a Windows-based handheld PC powered by the AMD Ryzen 7 6800U CPU and the Radeon 680M integrated GPU. So, just like the Steam Deck, it features an integrated graphics chip. However, it is substantially more powerful than the AMD Vangogh APU found in the Steam Deck. It features 8 cores, 16 threads, with a base frequency of 2.7 gigahertz, which can boost up to 4.7 gigahertz with a 15 watt to 28 watt TDP, respectively. The Radeon 680M is an RDNA 2 based graphics chip and features 12 cores at 2200 megahertz. And you can get the Geek with either 16 or 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM. This is the 32 gigabyte version, which means that we will have more available VRAM for the GPU to utilize in games, which will really come in handy when playing games on higher graphic settings or while docked at higher resolutions. It should also aid in reducing some of the stutter that we have seen in some games played on handheld devices. Our version also came with 2 terabytes of storage on a PCIe 3.0 M.2 2280 double-sided SSD, the same kind of SSD I have in my gaming rigs, and it can support up to 8 terabytes of storage and an SD card slot for even more storage. Now, I don't see myself ever having to upgrade the storage beyond 2 terabytes, but it is good to know that it is an option. All right, enough of the geek speak. Let's go ahead and open this thing up and see what's inside. So we have this nice little picture. We'll go ahead and set that to the side. Then we have what looks like instruction manuals and guides. And we'll come back to these a little bit later. Take this out here, and there it is. We have the actual device. Let's go ahead and take this out of the box and see how it feels in the hands. Wow, this feels really good in the hands. It has a very premium feel to it. And bear in mind, this is the budget version of the Ayaneo 2. The main difference is that it doesn't have the all glass front, which gets rid of the bezel. The same exact 7-inch screen, but there is a bezel on this one here. So we have some adapters, a charger here, and we have some international adapters. This is a 65 watt charger, I believe. And here, let's see what we have. This looks like a USB type C cable for the charger. Looks like a Asian adapter or European. I'm not sure which one they use over there. And We have some adapters for USB to USB Type C adapters. Not exactly sure what these are used for, but we'll come back to that in a little while. And not sure you guys can read that. I'll try to bring it a little closer to the camera so you guys can see it exactly what it says. After you replace the SSD by yourself or disassemble the handheld itself, the patch that comes with the handheld will be damaged. So this right here is to replace that patch. All right, so that's basically all that comes with the actual unit. I'm gonna make some room here on my desk so I can bring out the Steam Deck and give you guys an idea of just how big or small this device is compared to the Steam Deck. And we'll go ahead and get everything set up here on the Ayaneo Geek, and we'll be right back. All right, and we are back, and we have Windows all set up, and we have also installed a few games to show off as well. We'll show a few games in handheld mode in 800p to compare to Steam Deck, and also in docked 1080p mode so you can get an idea of the performance. But before we do that, let's take a quick tour of the unit, followed by a quick look at the software. We'll show off a few games, and then I'll give my final thoughts at the end. All right, so starting off with the screen, this is a 7-inch 1920 by 1200 LCD with 400 nits brightness. And I will say that this is a very nice looking screen. The picture looks very crisp and clear, even on lower resolutions such as 800p. We have two offset Hall joysticks along with the D-pad here. And we have our menu and options buttons down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And over on the right, we have our standard X, Y, A, B buttons. And down in the bottom right, we have a button for bringing up the taskbar and another for bringing up ISpace quick settings menu, and more on ISpace later. On the top, we have our triggers and left and right bumpers. These buttons and triggers all feel very good when you press them. Then we have our power button, which is also a fingerprint sensor. This allows us to log into Windows using our fingerprint rather than having to use a password or a PIN. A very nice touch, I might say. Then we have our microphone port and our volume rocker. Next, we have two USB ports, one of which is used solely for data transfer, and the other is used for power delivery as well as data transfer. Now, one of the cool things about the Ayaneo Geek is that it is designed to be able to play games at resolutions up to 1200p. Obviously, it's going to vary based on the game and how demanding the game is, but it does pack a lot of power, which means that it can handle gaming at 1080p most of the time just fine. What that means is that you can dock it to your external monitor and not have to worry too much about performance loss while docked. Now, to be fair, even the Steam Deck is able to play a lot of games just fine at 1080p, but in most cases, especially when it comes to modern AAA games, you may notice a loss of performance when playing at anything higher than 800p. Now, let's say you want to play much higher resolutions like 1440p or 4K with high or ultra settings while you're at home. Well, in the case of the Steam Deck, that would basically mean having to get a separate gaming PC with a powerful enough GPU to play games at those resolutions and settings. But when it comes to the Ayaneo Geek, you can actually hook up an eGPU to it and use it as your home gaming PC as well. So potentially, this could replace your gaming PC. Next, we have an exhaust port here, and we also have these two buttons here, which are customizable hotkey buttons and can be mapped to basically whatever you want. Out of the box, one of them comes pre-mapped to bring up the keyboard. On the bottom, we have two bottom firing speakers, another microphone port, another USB Type C port, which I believe also accepts power delivery. And we also have an SD card slot and a headphone jack. And on the back, we have more exhaust ports. All right, so now let's go over the software. As I mentioned, this is a Windows-based handheld, and it does come with Windows 11 pre-installed on the device. When you power it on, all you will have to do is complete the final steps of the installation by giving the unit a name and then selecting your preferences. When it launches into Windows, it will immediately bring you into the ISpace application, which is kind of like an all-in-one game manager. and also allows you to control certain aspects of the device, such as TDP, volume, brightness, and speed very easily by bringing up the quick settings menu. Windows feels buttery smooth running on this device. Mouse control is handled by the left joystick, and the X and A buttons act as your left and right mouse click buttons. Mouse movement using a joystick works pretty well, but doesn't feel as precise as using the trackpads on the Steam Deck. What I do like is being able to use the X and A buttons as the left and right mouse click buttons, as opposed to using the triggers or pressing down on the trackpads like we do on the Steam Deck. Also, this has to be said. I love SteamOS on the Steam Deck. It is a great operating system and works perfectly for the Steam Deck. The main drawback of SteamOS for me is that currently you cannot play every game on Steam in SteamOS. A good example of this would be Modern Warfare 2 or the majority of games that have anti cheat software. Outside of that, Valve does an awesome job of verifying which games work on SteamOS, and in some cases, releasing updates to SteamOS to allow games to run properly. Now, because most games are initially designed to run on Windows, this verification and update process isn't required for Windows based handhelds, which means that you will be able to run any game on this device. Steam games, Epic games, Battle.net games, Game Pass games, you name it. All right, so now let's take a look at some actual gameplay. First up is Hogwarts Legacy. We're running this in 800p on medium settings at the 22-watt TDP, which isn't even the max TDP of the Ayaneo Geek, and yet we are able to get anywhere between 45 and 60 FPS on medium settings with FSR set to quality. Now, in order for us to achieve anything remotely close to this on the Steam Deck, we would have to run the game on the absolute lowest settings with FSR set to it at the most balanced at the highest, and still we may not get FPS in this range as consistently at the max TDP of 15 watts. And here we are running around in the school, which was notorious for causing all kinds of frame drops and stutters, even after the day one patch, which did alleviate some of the issues, but still caused a lot of trouble for the Steam Deck, even on the lowest settings. Yet on the Ayaneo, we are still able to hold that 45 to 60 FPS range with no problems, only occasional dips below that. And this is still on medium settings with FSR set to quality. And next, we'll take a look at one of my favorite games to play on the go, and that is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Just like Hogwarts, we will be playing this in 800p medium settings with FSR set to quality at the 22-watt TDP. Now, I remember playing this on the Steam Deck, and one of the most demanding aspects of the game was web slinging through the world. It was sometimes a struggle to maintain anything over 40 to 45 FPS, even on the lowest settings. However, on the Ayaneo, we are able to maintain a much higher frame rate, usually between that 45 to 60 range and on higher settings. Now, I'm not going to sit here and make the claim that the Ayaneo completely blows the Steam Deck out of the water in terms of FPS. In fact, the difference in FPS is roughly 5 to 10 frames per second. But what you will notice are less stutters, less drops from 60 FPS down into the 30s, and better performance at higher settings and higher resolutions. Even during heavy combat scenes like this, you will notice that the Ayaneo does a better job at holding that 45 to 60 FPS range, whereas on the Steam Deck, you may see much larger drops in FPS from the 60s down into the 30s, which is where you start to think to yourself, maybe I should cap this game at 40 rather than 60. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at some COD Modern Warfare 2 gameplay docked at 1080p. Now, this is a game that I prefer to play docked to an external monitor along with a mouse and keyboard. We are going to be playing on the recommended preset with FSR set to balance. Modern Warfare 2 is a game that actually performs quite well on the Steam Deck in 800p in handheld mode in Windows. The problem arises when attempting to play this game at higher resolutions. So we saw fit to test this game on the Ayaneo docked in 1080p to see how well it fared compared to the Steam Deck. And like I said, this is where the Ayaneo really starts to pull away from the deck. Not only does it not require any sort of dual boot to play this game on the Ayaneo, but it also seems to handle this game with very little effort, even at higher resolutions. So here we are barely breaking below 60 FPS, which tells me that we may actually have some headroom to increase graphic settings, maybe go up to quality FSR and push the system even more. And just as a reminder, we are playing this at a 22-watt TDP, which is still 6 watts below the max of 28 watts and 7 watts above the max TDP of the Steam Deck. In summary, for those of you who are looking for a handheld device that can also be your go-to while docked at home, the Ayaneo serves that purpose much better than the Steam Deck, at least when it comes to AAA gaming in 1080p and beyond. So what are my final thoughts? Is the Ayaneo better than the Steam Deck? Should you trade in your Steam Deck for an Ayaneo? The answer is actually a bit complicated. My biggest issue with the Ayaneo is the price. Don't get me wrong, on every level, the Ayaneo outperforms the Steam Deck. The performance is better, the build quality is better, more expandability options, more options when it comes to what you can actually play, whether we're talking about games that are too demanding for the deck or games that won't run at all due to anti-cheat. The Ayaneo handles them all like a champ. 1 to 2 terabytes of storage right out of the box. Ours came with 2 terabytes and expandable up to 8 terabytes, 16 to 32 gigabytes of RAM. We opted for the 32 gigabyte version, which I believe will make the Ayaneo more future proof than the Steam Deck. The option to hook up an eGPU and convert the Ayaneo into a high end desktop replacement, Hall sensor joysticks, a very beautiful 1200p display, and a much more powerful CPU and GPU, which isn't a custom APU but is actually a Ryzen 7 CPU and a Radeon GPU, very popular in a lot of handhelds. The list goes on. Now, you will be paying over $1,000 for all of that. It's basically the 4090 of the handheld market. The question is it worth it? That's really going to depend on the person and his or her gaming needs. I think if the prices were in the same ballpark for most people, it would be a no brainer. I do feel that in another year or so, we will be looking for a Steam Deck 2 to be able to keep up with the types of demanding games that we'll be releasing, unless developers suddenly start releasing games, to be able to run better on the Steam Deck. But we haven't really seen too much of that so far. The INEO, on the other hand, I believe we'll have an easier time playing both current and future games. Something tells me that this current Steam Deck was in some ways like a test run to see how well it would do. And if it proves successful, then the next one will probably look more like an INEO with higher end specs and potentially a higher price tag. Now, as you may have also noticed, we were playing a lot of games at a much higher TDP than the Steam Deck's max TDP of 15 watts, which may lead to questions about battery life. The AMD 6800U is a much beefier processor than the Steam Deck's Vangogh, and thus requires much more power to run games at those higher frame rates. However, the Ayaneo also packs a much larger battery than the Steam Deck. So, in terms of the battery life, so far I haven't seen a huge difference. Obviously, for less demanding games that don't require as much processing power, you will be able to run them at a lower TDP to conserve battery. Now, let's talk about support. As we know, Valve is the clear winner when it comes to support, and in Ioneo's case, we just don't know. They are a much smaller company than Valve and they are China based. So, more than likely, if you ever did have to RMA your device, it will have to be shipped to China. That's just my guess. But because we don't know how well their RMA process is, I feel a little more comfortable taking the Steam Deck with me to work than the Ayaneo, at least until I get a proper case for it. I will say that on the software side, Ayaneo does appear to be pushing out regular updates and driver software for their handhelds, and they are releasing a new Linux-based OS, which may actually lead to even better performance if it's an operating system that uses less RAM. Then that'll be more available RAM for the GPU in games. I love that the Ayaneo even includes the tools to open up the device. I thought that was very cool. And I love that the CPU and GPU drivers can be directly downloaded from AMD. Some of you remember how long it took to receive updated APU drivers for the Steam Deck for Windows. It was pretty frustrating that we couldn't even find the Steam Deck APU listed on AMD's support site, and we were getting messages in certain games saying that our drivers were outdated. That was very frustrating. So at the end of the day, there are some definite pros and cons for each. As for me, I love them both. Really looking forward to making some comparison videos on some of the newer games coming out. Let us know what you guys think of the Ayaneo Geek down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and drop us a sub so that you don't miss out on future videos like this. We will now be expanding our coverage on the channel to include the Ayaneo Geek along with the Steam Deck. So tips, tricks, gameplay, performance videos will be coming for both, along with head-to-head comparisons. So keep an eye out for that. That's it for us, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Game over.